That's amazing. Kofi, man, welcome to the show. There is construction upstairs. I contacted the landlord, basically saying, "Dude, you said you weren't going to have it during the time of doing my show." Um, so if there's noise, I apologize. How are you doing? You doing okay today?
Yeah, very well. Nice and sunny in the
What's
capital
it?
city of South Africa and Pretoria.
Oh, nice and sunny. Kofi
Yeah.
Kouakou, he's African analyst, senior research fellow at the Center for Africa-China Studies at the University of Johannesburg. Kofi, you are the guy I want to talk to today. I want to play a clip for you first before anything else. And this clip, powerful, it's inspiring, and he makes a damn good point in this clip that I think a lot of people ignore. And I would argue is part of the reason they're trying to take his life. This is Ibrahim Traore. I may be mispronouncing the last name. I apologize if I am. But the new leader for Burkina Faso. Listen to what he says here.
Les questions que mes générations se posent sont les suivantes, si je peux me résumer. C'est de ne pas comprendre comment l'Afrique, avec tant de richesses sur notre sol, avec une nature généreuse, de l'eau, du soleil en abondance, l'Afrique est aujourd'hui le continent le plus pauvre. L'Afrique est un continent affamé. Et comment se fait-il que les chefs d'État traversent donc le monde à mendier? Voici des questions que nous nous posons et que nous n'avons pas de réponse jusque-là. Nous avons l'occasion de tisser de nouvelles relations.
His point is so on point, right? He's like, Africa is a rich continent. Like the amount of wealth that's in the African continent is astonishing. And the idea that we have to beg for help should be nonsense. It should be off the table. In which case, this thing is like when we ask ourselves questions of why do we not have possession of that wealth, we don't have answers for it. We need to forge a way forward. Yeah, he's right.
Yes, I mean, Jamal, this is one of the most painful realization by many people, many Africans since the, slavery days, the United States back to the 60s and 20th century, 21st century. People are still asking themselves those questions, but we know the answers. The West has been very powerful in sneaking around, organizing itself by proxies and so forth, sometimes brutally doing it straight away. That's brute force seems to be working, and they use it very well to sort of stamp out anybody, any African who wants to, show some kind of care to his people, to themselves, organizing so that they can have a decent world. And so let me say outright the thing I've been thinking about. You wanted also to talk about Russia. Russia is not in Burkina Faso because they want to buy peanuts and goats, right? They're not there for that.
And just be clear, the audience may not know this. Russia has sent commandos into Burkina Faso.
Yeah.
That's not something that's well known. Yeah.
That's right. They've got elite commandos there. As you know, Russia's managed to rebrand Wagner into Africa Corps. So when post-Prigozhin, that's how they did it. So now Russia has some kind of it's not a mercenary group anymore, like classical mercenaries, but they're part of the official Russian military strategy now. So which really, in fact, they've been copying the United States, paramilitary groups that are almost legitimate, but sort of off in case anything happens, the countries can just pull out of there. So as I said again, Russia is not there because they want to buy peanuts and goats. And no, Burkina Faso also want to be in partnership because they want to be begging bowls. And I think this speech, which was given at the Russia-Africa summit last year, was very powerful. The young man at the time, I think it was 36, he called out all these African puppets. Say, but how do you match this? There's some kind of cognitive dissonance, you have wealthy countries, all of them. There's not one African country that's not wealthy. But one of the things I remember Michael Parenti, the famous sociologist, used to say, said, these countries are not poor. They're exploited and made poor. And that's the point. Even the narrative of the World Bank, where I used to work, and the IMF and all these huge institutions, they're using, $1 to $2, and I asked myself, but wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. How do you figure out that the life, the standard of living of somebody is just $1 to $2? It doesn't make sense. And it's not really real on the ground because they've been sucking out the wealth of these countries. So young President Traore, and as you've seen this past week, he has become the symbol, almost like a celebrity all over the world. And that symbol is waking up a great deal of youth around the world. And this is concerning not just African puppets, but also their patrons in the West largely. They're worried and they want to get rid of him because he's now becoming the centerpiece that's igniting some kind of, it's not just a rebellion, but a serious, realization and waking up that we can't continue doing the same wrong things as leaders. We must change. We must not only change ourselves, but also make sure that when we govern a place, like a country, a community, a nation, we must do it right and just for everybody to benefit. And he's very modest. He doesn't have a complicated life. Of course, he's a simple man. He plays soccer, football. His salary, he cut down. He's still having his military salary, a very small, meager salary. Increased the salaries of civil servants by 50%. Managed to set up a gold refinery to really clean up the mess in the gold mining sector. And then, of course, cut a deal with the Russians to consider building 2 nuclear power plants for just energy to feed his country. And then, of course, the Russians have moved there in 2023. Because remember, the Soviet Union used to touch base with them in 1967. And then in 1992, they, let's say Soviet Union, fell apart. So Russia moved up because they didn't have enough money. They were sort of really, restructuring their system. So they went out, they closed their embassies, came back in 2023 with Prime Minister Lavrov. And this is becoming big. And the key issue here is, as I say again, it's not about peanuts and goats. West Africa is becoming, Jamal, it's a very important thing to look at. And this is a missing angle and insight. It's becoming a huge place for Eurasian influence as Russia builds up the strength of the defense, the security, the military, the protection system territorially. China complements with the finance, the economics, the building of the ports and other things. And this is a place to watch. And very soon, it's not just in Burkina Faso, but Russia might closely move down to Ghana or Ivory Coast and maybe Senegal, because the excitement about the youth, about finding somebody to help them. And we hear all the time, but wait a minute, Russia and China is going to be another exploiters. That's what we hear from the West. It's a very typical approach to cutting down people. You must make strategic decisions for partnership that can help you. It doesn't mean you're going to have to become another slave. And I think this is smartly what President Ibrahim Traore is exploiting, as well as President Assimi Goïta in Mali, as well as Abdurrahman Chiani in Niger, and it's growing.
My understanding, there were multiple attempts on his life. One, as you pointed out, it was poisoned. Another one, jihadis were apparently supposed to attack, kill him specifically in order to create turmoil in the country. And the clip or the picture that I was showing, Al-Qaeda branch killed 355 just not civilians in Burkina Faso. So it's somebody was making a point. It's very weird that they always go after enemies of the U.S. or go after, let's say, people that the U.S. don't necessarily like. Now, that was an old one. That was back in 2000, like, let's say 3 years ago, 4 years ago. But I'm
Yes.
pointing out that, the U.S. had been paying and backing like ISIS and Al Qaeda in Syria in order to undermine the Syrian government. They did the same thing for Gaddafi in Libya. And so it wouldn't necessarily be shocking to me that he has to deal with these coup attempts from these, let's say, terrorist groups that are trying to destroy what he's been trying to build with the help of the rest of Burkina Faso, or for that matter, the Sahel states in general. That,
Yes.
they're trying to take his life. And they're trying to take his life for a very specific reason, that he is effectively given a pathway to, I'm going to call it a new Africa, if that's not overstating it.
Yes. I mean, I even call the next Africa because it's not too far. And the idea that this young man of 37 is just challenging the humongous West by just doing the simple things that the other African leaders should have been doing is just extraordinary. I mean, the tremendous excitement. This past week, all around the world, there were protests telling the French and Americans, don't touch this man. In fact, he's gone beyond celebrity status now. He is probably the symbol that's now bringing not just Black people in Africa, but also, white people around the world. For example, I was watching George Galloway having series of little podcasts about him, as well as other people. And it's just growing. And there's the concern for the West and those who are hiding behind the curtain is that if this grows too far, they'll be losing their power. But many of them are really lost, especially the French. The French are scrambling. That's why they want to kill him. I mean, we can't even remember the number of attempted failed assassinations. And then sometimes we say 18, sometimes 20. We're not quite sure because they're all sort of things that they don't talk about. But he's really lucky to still be alive. And many of us, of course, are worried that, it reminds me of Fidel Castro. Castro, I think, escaped something like over 800 or 900
It's
assassinations.
a ridiculous number, right? Right. Exploding cigar. Yeah, just all sorts of weird
Exactly.
stuff. Yeah.
So they escaped. The playbook of the West and those who want to destroy these African countries is that they want to kill the heads, at least those who are emerging as potential leaders to just help Africa get rid of this choking yoke that's been on our neck for so many centuries now. And so the fight is going to be there, and we're all going to be fighting. Some of us are fighting with words, as I'm doing with you, and regularly on your weekly show,
Yeah.
writing op-eds to just create that conscience that there must be that kind of freedom coming, and we need to embody that. And the traitors must be dealt with harshly because they're the ones who are slowing down the progress of Africa by selling off the wealth, selling off the dignities, and then making people poor to death. And that is unacceptable.
Oh, I so agree with you. I think one of the most interesting things about this is he shines a spotlight on other African leaders. And it's like, okay, well, why couldn't you do this? Why couldn't you do this? You know what I mean? Like, these three states are effectively coming together. And in them coming together, they are coming up with ideas on, okay, how can we make our societies better? How can we make our people better? How can we increase the wealth? And he came to the conclusion, okay, well, these gold mines, these are ours. Why don't we take these gold mines? Like, effectively saying, look, we need a new norm. And the colonial yoke that was on us is preventing us from taking action that is in the betterment of our populations. And if you look at all of Africa, the fact that it's being exploited in the way that it's being exploited gets across how rich it is. I was watching this video, they were talking about uranium, and they were showing how the amount that Africa was getting for uranium, let's say it might have been like 1%, 2%. And then France would sell it for ungodly sums of money. Let's say it's like $5 and they sell it for like $500 a share. Yeah, just insane differential where they were effectively screwing over the country for their own benefit. and the government of that country, democratic as they call it, allowed it. Perfectly allowed it. This is perfectly okay. And you think to yourself, okay, well, what does this mean for other parts of Africa? Certainly they're seeing that example, or the populations are seeing that example. And if he is successful, oh my God, if he is successful.
He has been already successful. The simple fact, there's been very few people in the past, I would say, perhaps 40 years have been so, I mean, just it's the sudden, almost, I wouldn't say celebrity, but fandom, but just realization that but here's a symbol. It's not just a human being, but a symbol of something that all of us have been thirsting for decades. You know, how do we protect that person? How do we make sure that he continues his work in safety and then also in dignity so that nobody else around him, bodyguards or anybody else, kills him? And I'm sure you're aware that one of his close bodyguards was offered $5 million or something to just execute him. And the guy said, I can't sell my soul and the soul of my country as well, and the dignity of protecting our project, you know, being free for $5 million. And he went and then he reported that to Ibrahim Traore, and they caught the people who did it. But they're gonna keep trying. That's the thing about these guys. They just don't give up. So that's one of the reasons Russia is also a good partner there to help them beef up security, defense, and then the territorial integrity of the country. And sometimes you hear all these reports by jihadists are killing so and so. Be also watchful. In fact, there's a huge cyber war going on the internet, on social media, that I've got to tell you, the Burkina and Ibrahim Traore are winning this one with the help of Russia, of course, and then China. They're doing fabulous job. I mean, every time I put on my, if you're on TikTok or Instagram or whatever it is, boom, here's Traore. I mean, I just can't breathe. So they're doing something fabulous. But we must say also that, you know, in simple comparison term, if you took Burkina Faso and Russia, they're like a giants of 17 million square kilometers. And then the other one is roughly about, you know, 24, let's say, 24, 3,200 something square kilometers. That's about the sixth of Russia. And so the goal there, and we're hearing that, we heard from Michael Langley, the head of Africa, that President Traore is selling off the gold of Burkina Faso to pay off the Russians. My goodness, what an insult. Can't he use his own money to do what he wants to do with it, his own gold? You know the gall of this guy. And of course, everybody say, hey, I'm afraid to say this. This is what I'm reading out there. Why is this house nigger putting his hands in his mouth in something that he has nothing to do with, especially where his ancestors came from, to destroy Burkina Faso, to destroy Africa, and that must also stop. And so Langley is not really a welcoming person. At least his image is not well seen on the continent right now.
I can imagine. Yeah, I can imagine, right? I mean, but that's opposition that means you're in a good place. Like the notion that Africa was in good hands under colonialism is absurd. It's just absurd. And the notion that the colonial yoke that was stuck there when colonialism, quote unquote, ended is absurd. Like you can't have a country that, think of Russia, for example. Think of all the mineral wealth. Think of all the commodities. Obama made this point of saying Russia is a gas can masquerading as a state, as a country. The US took that to heart, and they believe we can knock the gas can over. They're Nigeria with snow. And what they come to find out was that it's one thing to have money. It's another thing to have materials. I can't put $1 in my gas tank. I can't put $1 in my house. I can't fertilize my grain with $1. But you can do that with commodities. Meaning you have an indispensable part of the world economy based on the wealth of that nation that you can't do without. And because of such, the economy kept ticking along despite the war. And they kicked ass in the war. And then if you look at Africa as a continent and you say to yourself, okay, but Africa is also rich. Why aren't they able to exploit the resources in the way that Russia is able to exploit their resources? And you have to kind of come to this conclusion of the colonial past, like the democratic structures that were set up, for example. Those things have not been to the benefit of Africa and for them to be able to use their own resources to enrich their own countries. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong with this.
Indeed. In fact, as I shared with you, I wrote 2 or 3 pieces, op-eds, a couple of years ago on the centrality of commodities, especially gold, right, in Africa, and especially in West Africa, like right all across the continent, there's gold. You know, if you remember the Empire of Mali with Kanka Musa in the 13th century, I mean, one of his trips he took to Mecca via Cairo was with hundreds of thousands of, gold bars and so forth, and then dropping off, killing the gold market in Cairo for a decade. But at the heart of that, that's what really attracted the Europeans, modern Europeans, to come and then do the scramble in Berlin, the Berlin Conference. But this gold is still there. They've discovered, as I sent you, another huge deposit right across all these countries, from all the way down Ghana, Ivory Coast, Guinea, Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, Mauritania, the southern part of Algeria. It's all full of gold. Unbelievable. They don't even know what they're going to do. So if President Trump wants to disengage from Africa, that's okay. In fact, we don't want that. We don't want him here because people can do business with other people who are not belligerent, you know. And it's not about war. It's about peace. Kind of the Chinese call it win-win way of doing, business with people. And people are just sick and tired of wars, Jamal. And then wars are destroying the continent. Look at the DRC. For the past 20 or 30 years, more than 10, 20 million people have died quietly, And so in Sudan as well, South Sudan. I mean, this must stop. And the African Union and all these international or regional organizations being called Africans are doing very little, if not nothing, to really help to bring peace. But still, they're asking the 3 countries of Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali to get back to ECOWAS, the dysfunctional organization that is being run and paid for by the West. And the guys are saying, it's a delusion. We're not going back there. We have our own way. We're going to sort ourselves. And we don't want to use that golden begging bowl to go to people and say, hey, by the way, can you give us a bit of money? When we have a golden bowl in our hands, we should be focusing on that. So where is it coming from? And we go and get more of that gold and organize ourselves. And I think this is a basic key issue now for the rest of Africa. And leadership that cares, leadership that really has some dignity, modesties to help not only their people, but finding ways to really be, if you want, honest with them and see, am I doing a good job? Are we doing a good job? How are we rating ourselves instead of looking at some of those World Bank indicators that are not really working? You take Ivory Coast, 7% growth for the past, I think, maybe 5 to 6, 10 years almost. But people are struggling. Young people that's just crossing the borders and going to France, dying in the Mediterranean, just because somebody's told them, the good life or paradise is in Europe, which is not true. I mean, you may have seen a video of Giorgia Meloni brutally attacking President Emmanuel Macron about Burkina Faso, where she's showing a picture about, she said in Italian, bambini, working in a gold mine. receiving nothing and being exploited by friends. I'm sure you've seen that.
Yeah, I saw her. She was very pissed off. I didn't know why she was pissed off though. But yeah, I
And
saw
that
a
was the
picture of
reason.
her.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so she was telling Macron, we don't want the Africans to come to Europe. That's not the point. The
That's what
point
she was saying.
is to leave them alone to have a decent life where they are.
Yeah.
I think it made sense. Just leave them alone. Don't disrupt their lives. Let them work on themselves and with what they have, or support them in the right way. But of course, Macron wouldn't have any of that. It went very quiet. He never had a rebuttal. But this video is going on all over the place. But
There is
you
no
know, in
rebuttal.
summary, it's going to be most of these people who are awakening, realizing that's going to be a big sacrifice before we get to that. What did Martin Luther King call it?
Promised land.
The promised land.
Yeah.
Probably
He said, I may
quoting.
not get to the promised land with you, but you know, you will get to that promised land.
Yeah,
Look,
we want it now. We don't want it to last another 10, 15, 30 years. We want it now. And I think that's the difference with old style, liberation or struggle leaders. The young people are now very thirsty and they're very impatient. And they're also learning a lot, finding out where the world is going, how the rise of new nations like Russia or China specifically, and then now Iran and possibly, North Korea, everybody has been insulting to say, and then of course Turkey. There's a mess in this whole thing, but it's a churning that Africans are understanding and to think there's a potential opportunity there to wake up and become again who they were before.
I don't blame him. I mean, like, he is making a point that is damning in many respects. How are we in this continent this wealthy, and yet we're this poor? How does that work? And it's like that question is damning. And you can imagine 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds, people who are living on the continent are maybe thinking the same thing, or at the very least, if they weren't before, with somebody like him that is a lightning rod for this level of progress or this representation, a symbol that he's beginning to represent. That's a wake-up call. I mean, it really
That is
is.
correct.
Whether or
Yes.
not this stuff can be done in 5 years or 10 years, I don't know, but it is definitely a wake-up call. Koffi,
Yeah.
thank you for this. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
My audience have been asking for videos talking about this. And when I saw the Russians were there to protect them, I was like, whoa, the Russians, like they've sent commando units to protect his
Yes.
life because of the attacks that have been coming externally from the country and from the West, backing some of these goons to go after him and take him out. He is a symbol that they do not want. So
it's a great global outpost for Russia as well. And in this messy world, if Russia can really position itself, as I was saying, Eurasian influence is really growing. You see flags of Russia almost everywhere in West Africa, and very soon, not many Chinese flags, but the Russian flag is up there. There's something about it, and also about President Putin, that's bringing those young people together. They just love it, and those who don't will complain. But the key to it is a very smart partnership with those who can help you. And then later on, you can decide if you want to be with them or not. And I think that's the key strategic way to go.
I think the Russian thing is resistance. They see Russia holding the line against imperial forces in NATO, and they don't buy the line in Ukraine.
That's right. Yeah.
Koffi, man, thank you for this. Koffi Kouakou, he's an African analyst, senior research fellow at the Center for Africa-China Studies at the University of Johannesburg. Thank you, Koffi. Be safe, man. Have a good day.
Thank you very much.